Hi, and welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So today what I want to do is talk a little bit about relative strength. I know a lot of people look at relative strength in different ways. I have what I think is somewhat of a unique approach to using relative strength, and I'm really trying to find emerging patterns. So let's go ahead and get into the agenda. So as opposed to just looking for the absolute strongest stocks, what I'm trying to find are relative strength patterns that suggest the beginning of a new trend on a relative basis. So that's what I would call emerging relative strength. I also like to use it in the midst of a consolidation pattern or a deep corrective pattern and start to compare it to the market. So I want to give you a couple different examples of how I would go about doing that. And then we also always want to look at stocks and how they're doing during pullbacks. So if a stock is handling a pullback much better than the market, that's usually a really good sign. And the relative strength will reflect that. And so that's one thing I definitely like to look for. And then finally, I do want to look at price relative to the relative strength line. So if I've got a relative strength pattern and I compare that to the price pattern, I think that can give me a lot of insight into what's actually taking place. So I'm going to go through and give some examples on those, and then we're going to go through the stock requests that came through. So let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. So the first stock I want to look at is URI, United Rentals, and all of these are weekly charts. I like to look at the weekly relative strength. Give me a real good feel for what's going on from a legitimate trending standpoint potentially. So if you notice, look at where this crossed the trend line, which had been in place as this was working sideways to downward in price. The price pattern was basically down. We started to see a little bit, maybe some signs of improvement, but the key thing here, I think, is I'm lining up the price with the relative strength break. And if you notice, we break the trend here in mid-October. And in mid-October, this hadn't even broken the downtrend line, or it was nowhere near hitting a new high relative to this prior peak. So we had a couple of weeks of information that I think is pretty valuable because the relative strength was leading at this point. It's telling us that we've been going through a consolidation for a pretty long period of time, almost 2 years, and we're breaking out of that consolidation and showing real strength relative to the price action because the price action was well below that prior peak. So when I see that, it gives me a lot more confidence in what I'm seeing on a price basis. And there were some attractive things taking place on URI on a price basis as well. I want to focus in on just the relative and what that can do and gives us sort of a leading indication that something's going on. Let's look at PACCAR. This is a little bit different. So again, we go through this sideways phase where price pattern is working sideways. We got hit pretty hard on a relative basis, but then look at if we do the 1, 2, 3 reversal pattern on the relative strength line itself, we break the trend line, we come back and test, and then we go to a new high. That was happening here well in advance of the start of the new trend. Okay, so what I like to do is see if I can find emerging relative strength patterns that lead me into price advances. Okay, so this was obviously holding up a lot better than the market, but the price pattern had not quite kicked in yet until maybe later in October, whereas the relative strength had really turned the corner way back in August. So I like having that in my back pocket. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to buy the moment this trend shifts to the upside. Now, if I'm a professional money manager, I might, because I know my game is a relative game. If I'm an individual investor, I'm probably knowing I've got this in my back pocket, but I'm going to use it to help me identify what stocks I want to be following a little bit more closely. Let's look at CMI. So this is a similar type of situation where it got beat up really badly and it went down with the price pattern. The relative strength and the price were in agreement. And then we made a turn to the upside, and look at the reversal pattern that takes place here. Really strong move to the upside. We get a minor little pullback and we turn up. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is that we're getting this deep pullback in price here, and this is not pulling back at all. all. We're not getting a pullback at all during this consolidation back to here. So that really increases the strength of this, because we know on a relative basis, we actually know the only reason why this was pulling back is because of the market. That's really what this is telling us. So we want to be on the lookout for that. AMP is another example of something like that, where we have this move and this pullback happens while after the trend line break. And look, we get no pullback whatsoever in conjunction with the price pattern. The price gets a deep pullback and the relative strength line keeps moving up. Now, I view this as more of an emerging pattern because it just went through a correction. You see how the price pattern went through a pretty deep consolidation, and now we're starting to show signs of improvement. And yeah, I would highlight this, which I did on my reports, probably somewhere in here, but I had a leading indication based on the relative strength that there was a new emerging pattern developing, as opposed to saying, you know, looking at it here or looking at it here. Yeah, it's hitting a really high level. It's really strong at this point, but it's not giving me the kind of feedback that I want. I want early emerging coming out of here, as opposed to already made a big run to the upside on a relative basis. Finally, let's take a quick look at Amazon, because this is sort of the opposite, right? We had this move to the upside, and in 2021 it broke out, went to new highs, and look at how this failed miserably on a relative basis, making new lows and lower highs and lower lows. So now what do we need? We need an emerging relative strength pattern to develop. We need to break the downtrend line, and we're going to need to get this to cup around. We need to see real signs of improvement before doing anything, other than trading this pattern or trading this stock. If you're looking for something that could be a little bit more significant, my suggestion is wait for the relative strength to show signs of real emerging changes here. All right, let's go ahead and get into the individual requests. Just briefly, my services can be found at rabelstockresearch.com. You can find the information on the individual package there, as well as the information on the trend and momentum course that I put out recently. So go ahead and take a look if you have an interest. Let's move on to the analysis now. I'm going to take a quick look at the S&P. I do a more extensive one for Friday on my YouTube channel. So let's just look at what's taking place here, because we've got this, and I've kind of been saying the same thing, because what we've got taking place is we're below a declining 18-month on one end, and we're above a rising 18 on the other. And I think if you look at it this way, it can give you a pretty good idea of what to expect. So we knew we had some resistance up around 4,200, which is where that 18-month is. Now we have this 4,000 level, which is where the 18-week is. So we're kind of caught in between those two. Now what happened this week that I think was a little bit of a win for the bears is that we have a break of the daily 18, which again overlays perfectly with the trend line. And we've got, so the pattern now, we have a 1 in a 1, 2, 3 change in trend. If we go up and test and fail and turn back down, in the process of doing that, we will likely be breaking the 18-week. I would view that as a big negative if that takes place. Now, the biggest problem I have with the market right now is this ADX was not that strong. It's certainly not that strong here. So, I mean, until we get a resolution between the 18 and month and the 18-week, I don't think there's a whole lot to do right now. But what I thought would be more interesting, actually, is to go and take a harder look at the IWM, the Russell 2000 index. And let's just kind of continue with this theme of relative strength. And notice what we've got here. We've got a break of the downtrend line. And, you could basically call these kind of tests of this low. And we don't have a crystal clear breakout, but certainly signs of improvement where this line is making higher highs and higher lows. When we look at the price pattern, we have broken the downtrend. And now we've come back and tested, and then we made a move back up, but we have not taken out this key level at 200. I think that's a really important thing to watch here. If we get a move up through 200, you'd have to consider that this trend has shifted back to the upside. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to last forever. We just say for now the trend is to the upside, and I think as long as it holds the 18-week, we could call it in an uptrend on that weekly chart. So we want to keep an eye on this because I think getting through 200 would be pretty important, not only for the IWM in more of a small cap universe, but I would consider that a bullish sign for the overall market if we get into that position. Now, in the short term, again, look at what happened. We had this 18 trying to hold, and we just broke that. So I think that increases odds of more consolidation while the MACD works its way back towards the zero line. The momentum just wasn't that strong on this move. Despite this looking like a pretty strong move, it didn't really create that big of a move in the ADX on the daily chart. And green DI still isn't really clearly above 25 on the weekly. Okay, let's look at the software index as this was a request. And so what I want to point out here is we can see the relative strength definitely improving. I mean, you can see this is showing signs of improvement on a relative basis to the S&P. There's no doubt about that. But we've got some other issues taking place here that I think are worth mentioning. So the person who asked about this mentioned the quarterly chart. And, what I want to point out is, yeah, we are pulling back to a rising, we're kind of between a rising 18 and a rising 40, but notice how this has lost some slope, this 18 on the quarterly chart. The other thing that I tell you is this was the last breakout area right here. We went through a consolidation, and then we broke out, okay? We made a pretty strong, powerful move up, and you notice how we retraced 100% of that move. That, to me, is not ideal. That is really not what we want to see. And when I see that kind of a retracement, that big of a retracement, then what I'll do is look at the fib retracement and look at around the 50% mark of the decline. So somewhere in this zone here is a 50% of that mark. Now we do have a big monster red bar, and the midpoint of that is pretty important, and we've failed at it twice already. I don't think there's anything to do until we can get back above that. Now that's looking at it from an extreme long-term standpoint. Notice if we switch this back to a monthly chart, how we just rallied up and failed at the 18-month. You see how we got a move going? And the problem I've got with this is, sometimes you'll push through that line, but not when the MACD is in this position. We've just worked our way back to the zero line on the weekly chart. I do think we want to pull back and test a little bit better the 18-week. Another one where if we can get back above this prior peak up here around 132, 133, then I'd consider the trend have shifted to the upside, but it's going to take a lot of work, I think, to get through that 18 months. So we can keep an eye on it, but I don't think I would, other than trading, I don't think I would want to look at this as anything spectacular. Now, the one thing I will say is because it does look like it's broken the downtrend and tested, I'd want to go and look inside this software area and see if anything is clearly in a bull trend. That, to me, is where I'd want to be looking. I want to look at stocks that are above their 18-month that are software companies right now, not ones that are bottoming like this. So it might be coming into major support here at 100, and if this is coming into support, the stronger stocks in software should start doing well. So that's how I would go about using this sector action. Okay, let's look at the next request, RNR. Really pretty strong move on the monthly. We've made a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-month move up. Yeah, we broke to a new high, but look at how overbought we got in the process. Yes, we had a low ADX condition, but that breakout took place at 175, and we've gotten pretty good follow through from that. So what do I think? What I think here is the momentum is really, really good, and I like this pattern, but I need a pullback. I mean, there's no entry right now. It's too overbought for me. I'm looking for some kind of a consolidation, maybe be watching for this to come into 200 area. And if we can get an opposing trend pattern where the 18 crosses down below the 40 and the MACD comes down near zero on the daily chart, we could be setting up near the 18-week here. So that's probably what I'd be looking for right now in this one. Datadog. Haven't seen this requested in a while. So we've had this decline. Look at the big round number. I mean, keep an eye on this, guys. I know I mention this all the time, but it's amazing how round numbers act as support and resistance. So we fail at that and we make a big drop. Now, we've got an 18-month that's rolled over. Okay, now there's some good news here in that we've dropped down, we've rallied up, and we've made a new low. MACD is not confirming, but more important to me is the ADX, where while it was above 25 here on this decline, is no longer above 25. It did not hit a new peak, and it didn't get above 25. So that tells me we should be on the lookout for a reversal here. If you were aggressive, you could start to consider doing this, but frankly, I'd like to see the 18 weeks start to cup around a little bit better. I'd like to see the MACD get back above the zero line, and I really want to see green DI break out a little bit. We've got this problem overhead, the 18 months. So I know right now it's going to be a trading move, but it could be a pretty good one if it sets up. Because we have this divergence here, we could consider playing this, but we didn't have good enough ADX on this move. So I'd probably be watching for maybe a breakout through 90 or some kind of a setup on the weekly chart. Gartner Group has been a great stock. It's held up really well. I mean, look at the relative performance in the stocks. And this is one that never broke down. The 18-month stayed rising. There aren't a lot of stocks, especially in this area, that really held up like this one did. Now, what's taken place recently is more of a sideways consolidation in the trend. We don't have any new momentum in this yet. So we're kind of forming this sideways pattern, and I think I probably want to see it break out from this consolidation area. We've got good enough ADX here and really good ADX here to want to play this if it gets going again. But based on the way this is set up, I think we have to see a breakout. I don't see any real entry pattern developing any other way. Okay, so NTR, this is still in the realm, in the big picture, it's still in the realm what I would consider to be in a bullish trend. We had a pretty deep correction off this high. Okay, we're sort of overrunning the 18-month. We're overrunning the signal line. But this ADX is still keeping us in the game. It's saying, this was strong enough to the upside, and we haven't really lost that yet. So if the weekly can get going again, then we might have some potential. But if I'm looking at this, I pretty much have to draw the downtrend line like this. So what I need now is a move to the upside. Don't skip a time frame here. Sometimes I might want to go straight to the daily, but I don't want to do that here. I want to break this downtrend line first and foremost. I got to get through that. And then if green DI is kicking into gear, you could look to the daily from there to form maybe a little higher low as an entry. If this is tight enough to the trend line when it breaks, and we get a DI confirmation, you could buy the break of the downtrend line. But most likely, because of this overrun, we're going to want to see a breakout and then a higher low form on the weekly chart. So we want to buy the two. You get a break of the trend line, and then as this makes a higher low here, we want to be looking to play that. That would be the ideal entry point based on what I'm seeing in the two time frames. Remember, there was no real selling down here on this decline, so I'm still interested in this. Okay, MBUU. So there are some signs of improvement. I mean, we undercut this low here and had zero follow through, got an undercut and rally pattern and kicked up, but we don't really have any momentum yet, and this is still low ADX. So MACD has got me somewhat intrigued because it's worked off the overbought condition and come all the way back down to here, and we got a reaction. But we have a declining 18-month, and as I said, we don't have any momentum yet. So what does that mean? I personally, I want to see a little bit more strength here and then look to play some kind of a pullback. So I want to see a little bit more strength in green DI before this really gets going. Personally, I'd really like to see this 18-month flatten out a little bit. That's where I'd start to feel a lot more comfortable. We really have a shift in the trend. Textron, another really good stock that has held up really well. Let's look at the relative strength on this. So This has been, it kind of emerged out of a consolidation back here in October. Do you see that? And it was a really early warning sign that something good was going on. Now, where I would be highlighting this in my reports and stuff is here, because I want to see a little bit of price improvement. And we got this a little bit of confirmation here. So overall, this looks pretty solid as a pattern. Now the question becomes, what's the entry? You could play this off the daily chart coming up through this resistance area around 75. I think you could do that. Now, because the market is in sort of a position where we don't have a confirmation of a new uptrend and we don't have a confirmation that it's breaking down, I would probably play a little bit smaller. Is probably how I would handle this in this situation. If we get some strength out of the market while this is breaking out and we get a little bit more confirmation, especially if the S&P can get through 4,200, then you can go full position in this. This is a really solid looking trend and I think a tradable play. But you handle the money management the way you think is best. I just have a feeling, just based on the way this is holding up, if it gets going, it could play pretty well. All right, we're going to look at I got some requests on some semiconductors, so let's go ahead and look at these. This is one of my favorites in the semi area. You notice how this area, it had some resistance here right around, that was right around 150, I believe, 180. Okay, right around the 180 mark. We got through that, and now we're trying to hold that area. We really want to hold 180, 175, 180 on a pullback. I think if we came back down through that, I think that would really hurt any real upside potential in this. But the overall pattern is really solid. Look at this new momentum forming here. We've got really strong momentum here. So we got strong momentum in 2 back-to-back time frames. I think this could be considered on this pullback, but we need a trigger. You could get a higher pivot low as an entry point here, and then you'd play a tighter stop if you want. I like the monthly and weekly in this, so it would be nice if we got some form of like a little pinch play or something like that to develop. But, you know, again, overall, this is definitely one I'd be watching pretty close for a new buy signal. This one is improving. I mean, I think there's definite improvement, but I do think it's on the earlier end of things. It's not really confirmed yet. We still have a declining 18-month, and as I've been saying, when you cross a declining 18-month, you usually have to come back and do more testing. And if this can hold and come back around, the next time up through this area, you'll probably have a flat 18-month. Look at this. This is why I'm intrigued by this. We worked off the overbought, came back down to the zero line, and starting to turn. So pretty intrigued by that. I like the look of it. Really looks pretty good. LSCC, Lattice. So I think this is one of the stronger names. Needs a pullback. It's a little extended. We just ran up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row. So I would be I'd be a little cautious about buying this pullback. Just because it's a little extended on the weekly. I'd watch for a pullback on the weekly chart as sort of my next buy signal. I mean, you could do it here, but you're going to have to play it really tight, use an hourly or something like that to trigger you in. So REGN, I'm not overly excited about this one. We just broke out of this 775 area and this failed at it miserably after hitting the big round number at 800. So it looks to me like there's a little resistance. We got a little slowing in the momentum condition. This broke out and we didn't really get the ADX to even move on the daily chart. I think on a bigger picture pattern, this is okay above 700. I mean, I'm not trying to say it's going to get killed or anything. If I'm looking to put new money to work on a buy, this one doesn't really appeal to me that much. Again, unless I'm going to go down to an hourly chart and play it for a little trade. BEP, I'm going to answer this one really quick in terms of what I don't like about this. We have a counter parallel lines. This is one of the patterns from my trading course. I don't like this as a short. These parallel lines are suggesting to me that we've got some kind of a reversal potentially setting up. And if this actually came down below and we got this to turn back up, especially with a little green, I could see this having a pretty decent trade back up towards 30 or something like that. So I'm not as intrigued by this one. We are a little extended on the monthly as well. Okay, so question on this. This is I'm not even sure. This is a pink sheet guy, I think in crypto land or something like that. And the question was, do you even want to mess with something like this? So my feeling is I usually go by volume. Okay. I mean, I don't usually look at anything under $5. The biggest problem I have with this is managing the risk. When you get anything under $5, it's very, very difficult to manage risk. So the pattern itself is a thing of beauty. Now, I don't have a problem taking a small portion of the account, maybe like 5% or something like that, maybe 10% to a lot, to positions like this that are a little bit more aggressive, where you give them a lot more room than you might. So instead of, a lot of times I'm trying to risk right around 10% on a weekly chart, maybe you give something like this like 20 or even 25%. You're going to take a smaller position by default doing something like that, because if you're giving it more room, then if you risk 1% or whatever, you're going to have a much wider stop. So that's kind of how I'd handle that. But we need a little entry here. We need a higher low on the daily chart. Overall pattern looks really good. New momentum here, strong momentum here, pinch play. We just need a pullback and a higher low. So that's how I'd look at that. Thanks for joining me today. My contact information is listed, and if you have any stock requests, send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.